Burma. That name may not resonate as much in memories of World War II as Normandy or Stalingrad, but for those of us who fought there, it was a world of hardship, of hope, and of hard lessons in survival. This is a story about war, but it is also a story about people, about soldiers from all over the world, Britain, India, Africa, America, China, fighting together in one of the most hostile environments on the planet. Burma was not only a battlefield, it was also a terrible challenge. The rugged mountainous terrain, harsh monsoon climate, and deadly tropical diseases such as malaria and dysentery became strategic factors, sometimes even more dangerous than the Japanese. In the early 1940s, Burma was the crossroads of Asia. It was where the interests of Britain, America, China, and Japan directly clashed. For the British Empire, Burma was the eastern defense line, the wall that protected India, the jewel in the crown. If Burma fell, the door to the subcontinent would be wide open.
For the British Empire, Burma was the eastern defense line, the wall that protected India, the jewel in the crown. If Burma fell, the door to the subcontinent would be wide open. For the Japanese Empire, the aim was clear, to cut off the Burma Road to strangle China. At the same time, Burma was a vital source of resources such as oil and rubber, and a defensive belt for the territories it had conquered. Along with the great powers, local nationalist forces also played an important role. Many Burmese, dissatisfied with British rule, saw the Japanese as liberators, hoping to regain their country's independence. I was just a young scout, just arrived in Burma. It felt strange, damp, and dangerous. We knew a great battle was coming, but no one could imagine the ferocity of it. In January 1942, following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan launched a series of lightning attacks across Southeast Asia. The Burma Campaign began when the Japanese 15th Army advanced from Thailand.
The Japanese, with their extensive combat experience and superior jungle warfare tactics, quickly overwhelmed us. They used infiltration and encirclement tactics with great skill, constantly outflanking and cutting off the retreat of the Allied units. Our defending force, which consisted of British, Indian, and Burmese units, was largely inexperienced, ill-prepared, and ill-equipped for jungle warfare. One of the decisive battles took place at the Sitang River in February 1942. Here, a hasty decision to destroy the bridge left most of the Indian 17th Infantry Division trapped on the east bank and destroyed, a disaster that hastened the collapse of the entire defense line. Rangoon, the capital and most important seaport, fell in March 1942, completely cutting off the Burma Road. By May 1942, as the monsoon season began, the last survivors reached India, ending a disastrous campaign that had severely damaged British military prestige. It was a long and humiliating retreat.
What followed was one of the longest and most arduous retreats in British military history. Under the command of General Harold Alexander and then General William Slim, the remnants of the Allied forces, along with tens of thousands of civilian refugees, struggled nearly 1,000 miles through rugged terrain to reach India. They were not only pursued by the Japanese, but also by hostile Burmese militias, and faced starvation and disease. Malaria, dysentery. They attacked us more brutally than bullets and bombs. More people fell from disease than from fighting. Along with us, tens of thousands of civilian refugees had to leave everything behind, fleeing the war. It was a haunting image of the devastation that war brings to everyone. The Japanese pursued relentlessly. Their scouts were cunning, following us every step of the way. Their battlefield intelligence was very effective in the early stages.
Japanese tactics were based on agility, surprise, and the ability to cut off retreat routes. They always sought to flank, turning the advantage of terrain into a deadly trap. They were brave warriors, trained rigorously. Every Japanese soldier knew how to use weapons effectively, even in the most difficult conditions. We were poor, but we kept trying to adapt. Every bullet, every gun was valued. Every reload was a hope.
Every kilometer we fought, ambushes were constant, exhaustion and fear were our companions. But the will to survive held us together. In this environment, even the most modern technology was powerless. We had to resort to the most primitive means of transport. The elephants, giant but gentle animals, became silent heroes. The enemy was always close. Their mortars were a nightmare. They could fall from anywhere, at any time. No place was truly safe. With each passing day, we lost brothers, not just from bullets, but from illness, from exhaustion. The suffering seemed endless. Finally, we reached India, a relief, but also a humiliation. Our forgotten war had just begun.
After the defeat in 1942, the morale of the Allied forces in India was very low. The Burma front was considered a secondary battlefield, neglected and lacking in everything. In 1943, the 14th Army was created, and General William "Bill" Slim was appointed commander. This was one of the most important decisions of the entire campaign. Slim, a practical man, understood the soldiers and was a brilliant strategist. He made a revolutionary change. He went to the front lines, talked directly to the soldiers, solved their problems, and convinced them that they could defeat the Japanese. The 14th Army was a huge, multinational army, considered the largest in the Commonwealth, with a strength of 1 million at its peak.
The force consisted of British units, but its backbone was made up of Indian divisions and divisions from West and East Africa. Feeling abandoned, they called themselves the Forgotten Army. But under Slim's leadership, they found purpose and faith again.
Slim declared that disease, especially malaria, was enemy number one. He imposed strict preventative health measures, including the mandatory use of anti-malarial drugs. This resulted in a dramatic reduction in disease casualties, which helped maintain the army's fighting strength. The Burmese terrain made overland supply virtually impossible, especially during the rainy season. Slim and the Allied commanders placed their bet on air power. C-47 Dakota transports became the lifeblood of the 14th Corps, parachuting everything from food and ammunition to donkeys and field artillery into forward positions. Slim developed new tactics to counter the Japanese. He emphasized extensive training in jungle warfare and aggressive patrolling. Most importantly, he introduced the concept of the defensive box. Accordingly, when surrounded by the Japanese, the Allied units would no longer retreat in panic. Instead, they would regroup, form a solid defensive perimeter, and fight to the death, relying entirely on supplies dropped from the air. This tactic completely neutralized the Japanese's specialty of encirclement.
We learn how to operate each type of weapon in the most proficient way. From rifles, machine guns to mortars. Every part, every operation had to be precise.
Air defense was a vital part of the new strategy. Protecting our airspace meant protecting our lives and supplies. Intelligence did not come only from the locals. Technology, however primitive, was also beginning to be applied. Radar, however primitive, gave us early detection of enemy aircraft. Every soldier was trained to maintain his weapon. Survival depended on your gun not jamming when you needed it most. Slim taught us to think flexibly. No two battles were the same. Each mission required its own tactics, based on the latest intelligence. In contrast, Japan's logistics system, which relied on manpower, donkeys, and the seizure of local food, was fatally flawed. They had underestimated the importance of logistics, a mistake that would cost them dearly.
That was the difference between the two armies. One was fed by the sky, the other by the jungle. One was stronger, the other was exhausted. With the new training, we were transformed. From frightened soldiers, we became more confident warriors, ready to face the enemy. Morale was everything. Slim had restored our faith. We were no longer the Forgotten Army. We were the 14th Corps, and we would win. Intelligence was vital. Every signal, every telegram could change the course of a battle. Aerial reconnaissance gave us the big picture. Every little detail in a photograph could be the key to a great victory.
We were not just defending, we were actively hunting the enemy. Every jungle was a potential battlefield, and we turned it to our advantage. The cooperation with the locals was invaluable. They knew the jungle better than anyone. They were our eyes and ears. While we were being treated and supplied, the Japanese were struggling with disease and starvation. It was a logistically unequal battle. In the sky, the Dakotas remained a symbol of hope. Every time they flew over, we knew we were not alone. That was how we turned the tide. From a broken army, we became a well-oiled war machine, ready to fight to the end.
In 1944, believing that the Allied forces were still weak, General Renya Mutaguchi, commander of the Japanese 15th Army, launched Operation Yugo, a large-scale offensive into India. The objective was to capture Imphal, a vital Allied logistics hub, and Kohima, a strategic village on a major supply route. Mutaguchi believed that a quick victory would destroy the 14th Army and spark an anti-British uprising in India. Mutaguchi's plan was extremely bold, but also fraught with risks, especially logistically. He ignored warnings and believed that his men could live off the spoils of war. This was a fatal mistake. They advanced without solid supply lines, depending entirely on what they could find in the jungle. It was a life-or-death gamble. The Japanese attack resulted in one of the fiercest and most iconic battles of the war. At Kohima, a small British Indian garrison of about 1,200 men was surrounded by the Japanese 31st Division, some 12,000 men.
In extremely harsh conditions, they fought tenaciously, holding the Japanese at bay in close-quarters combat, most famously the Battle of the Tennis Court, where the two sides were only meters apart. On the Japanese side, despair began to creep in. Poor logistics had turned brave fighters into hungry ghosts. Our air power helped to relieve the pressure on the men on the ground. Spitfires cleared the skies, giving the enemy no chance to breathe. Our stubborn resistance at Kohima allowed Allied reinforcements to arrive in time and relieve Kohima, a crucial turning point in the entire campaign. Meanwhile, at Imphal, the Allied 4th Corps divisions were also surrounded, but this time they did not panic. Applying Slim's defensive box doctrine, they held their ground and were fully supplied by a massive airlift.
We had enough guns, enough food, we could fight as long as we wanted. While the Allies inside the encirclement were well supplied, the Japanese outside began to die from hunger, disease, and lack of ammunition as their fragile logistics system collapsed. They had no strength left to fight. It was a collapse of the will, not only on the ground, but also in the air. Every pilot had to be a genius to survive. It was a deadly dance in the air. Every second was decisive. A small mistake could cost you your life.
On the ground, we had new weapons too. Tanks, though difficult to move through the jungle, made a difference in the big battles. That was the loser's perspective. The Japanese soldiers, they were human beings, fighting for their ideals. But they were abandoned, without supplies, and finally faced destruction. Their will to fight was gone. Mutaguchi had failed, and they paid the price. Victory had come, but what victory is without a price? Looking at the Japanese soldiers lying dead, I felt no victory, only the waste of war. By June 1944, when the rainy season came, the Japanese offensive had completely failed. Their retreat had become a disaster. Tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers died on the way back to Burma, not from fighting, but from hunger, thirst, disease, and exhaustion.
The Battle of Imphal Kohima was considered the heaviest land defeat in the history of the Japanese army up to that time. It completely destroyed their offensive power in Burma and decisively transferred the strategic initiative to the Allies. The final victory was ours, a victory that was paid for with blood and tears, with resilience and painful lessons. This was a victory of unity. A multinational army with people from all continents had overcome all challenges together. Comradeship was created through hardship. We were not different enemies, we were brothers on the battlefield. Each of us had a family, a life to return to. That was the greatest motivation to continue fighting.
The Burma Campaign was also a major theater for unconventional warfare. Long-range penetration units, such as the British Chindits and the American Merrill's Marauders, conducted daring raids deep into the Japanese rear. Although their strategic effectiveness is debatable, and they suffered very high casualties, these units provided a major morale boost, demonstrating that Allied soldiers could fight effectively in the jungle. The Indian divisions formed the backbone of the 14th Corps, making up the bulk of the troops and participating in all the major battles. The West and East African divisions also played an indispensable role, renowned for their endurance and skill in fighting in difficult terrain. In war, humanity is the most precious thing. Even the enemy, when they die, is still human. Burma was liberated. One of Japan's strongest armies was destroyed, shattering the myth of their invincibility and demonstrating the vital importance of air logistics in modern warfare.
Yet the Burma Campaign remains forgotten. It took place in a remote location, little noticed by the Western media. The main combatants were not British or American, but Indian and African, which means it is rarely mentioned in the Western popular memory. Ultimately, the victory in Burma was overshadowed by larger events, such as the fall of Germany and the dropping of the atomic bomb on Japan. But the oblivion does not diminish its importance. The Burma Campaign was a war of resilience, innovation, and sacrifice. It was a testament to the fact that war is not decided by big battles, but by the ability to survive, supply, and adapt in the harshest conditions. For the millions who fought and died there, it will never be a forgotten war. The memory of them, of what happened, will always live on. And I remember. Remembering the fallen friends, remembering the fierce battles, remembering the lessons of survival. The war is forgotten, but the memories are not. It lives on in us who have returned, and in this story.